She said she was in debt, but there was more to her drunken mistake than I ever expected. When I, Ethan, 26M, met Sarah, 24F, I was at a place in my life where I felt ready for something real. I had a stable job as a web developer, a solid group of friends, and was looking for someone to share it all with. We clicked immediately when we met at a friend's party, and for the first few months, our relationship was as perfect as I thought it could get. But looking back, there were so many red flags I missed. Sarah was magnetic, her laughter lit up a room, and she seemed deeply caring and empathetic. But there was something I couldn't quite place. Sometimes, I felt she was hiding parts of herself. She often mentioned her financial stress, chalking it up to student loans and a rough patch in college, which didn't seem like a big deal at first. But what I thought was manageable debt quickly unraveled into something far darker. After a year, Sarah moved into my apartment. She was between leases, and it seemed logical. Besides, I wanted to help her save money. Initially, I thought it would be a great test for our relationship. But within weeks, I started seeing little glimpses of the Sarah I never knew. She'd take long, private phone calls, sometimes sounding distressed, but every time I asked, she brushed it off as just a friend in trouble. The first time she asked for help with her bills, it felt normal. Couples help each other out, right? But then came another bill. Then a missed payment on her credit card. Each time, she promised to pay me back, reassuring me that this was just temporary. Months went by, and by now, I was covering her share of the rent, utilities, and even small things like groceries. Her excuses were endless, each one as urgent as the last. She had unexpected medical bills, car trouble, or client payments delayed. I wanted to believe her, so I kept helping. But one day, while sorting through some papers, I stumbled across a letter buried deep in her drawer, a collection notice for a massive gambling debt. When I confronted her, she broke down, admitting she'd struggled with a gambling addiction for years. She claimed she'd quit and was working to pay it off. She said she was ashamed and didn't want to burden me. I was angry but also sympathetic. I wanted to help, so I suggested counseling, and she agreed. For a while, I believed we'd turned a corner. She showed me her credit report, we set a budget, and it felt like we were rebuilding trust. Until she borrowed money from my account without telling me. She swore it was an emergency, a one-time thing, but my trust was shattered. After another argument, she promised again that she was done with gambling, and I gave her one last chance. Not long after, she told me her mom wanted to meet with me. I assumed it was to apologize on Sarah's behalf, to show support for her getting better. But when I got there, her mother launched into this heartfelt speech, thanking me for being there for Sarah. She casually mentioned, "I just wish her father hadn't left us all these debts to deal with." Wait. Her father's debt? Sarah had never once mentioned inheriting family debt. I decided to dig deeper. That night, I confronted Sarah, and she froze. She admitted that her father had passed away, leaving massive debts she tried to manage. She swore she didn't tell me because it was too painful, but I couldn't shake the feeling she'd hidden it for another reason. As months passed, Sarah's spending didn't slow. Whenever I questioned her, she'd start crying, begging for patience. Eventually, my own savings started dwindling, and I began resenting her. Then, one night, she came home smelling of alcohol, claiming she'd just been out with friends. Her story didn't sit right, but I ignored my gut, not wanting to accuse her of anything. However, soon after, one of our mutual friends reached out, asking if Sarah and I were still together. He confessed he'd seen her out with another guy, looking more than friendly. My heart sank. When I confronted her, she claimed it was just a drunken mistake, a moment of weakness. I was furious, but once again, she cried and apologized, saying she'd been under so much stress. Determined to get to the bottom of things, I hired a private investigator. It felt extreme, but I needed answers. What came back was shocking. Not only had she been seeing the guy she claimed was just a friend, but she was also going out frequently to gamble. She'd even taken out loans behind my back. When I confronted her with the evidence, she turned cold, accusing me of spying and not trusting her. She stormed out, leaving me with a mountain of her debt. In the aftermath, I decided to take action. I called her mom, informing her of everything, and discovered yet another twist. Sarah's parents had never been in debt. She'd lied to me, using her family as a cover for her addiction. It turned out, she'd also been cut off financially by her family because of her spending habits, something she never told me. Months after we split, Sarah contacted me again, begging for one last favor. She said she was in trouble with some loan sharks and didn't know where else to turn. I told her I'd think about it, but I never replied, knowing this would be a vicious cycle if I let it continue. Her mother reached out, asking me to forgive Sarah, claiming she was getting better. But I knew better than to get pulled back in. In the end, I decided to move on and focus on rebuilding my own finances and emotional health. For a while, I was haunted by guilt, wondering if I should have done more to help her. But now, I understand that helping someone doesn't mean enabling them. Sometimes, the hardest thing is to walk away for good. Update. It's been almost a year now since we parted ways. Occasionally, I hear from mutual friends about how Sarah is still struggling, jumping from one financial crisis to another. Part of me still wishes things had turned out differently, but I know now that I can't be responsible for someone else's choices. My cousin tried to take my inheritance, so I made sure the family knew every secret she hid. I, 29M, grew up with a close-knit family. My parents were big on family events, and every birthday or holiday meant huge gatherings. My cousin Lisa, 27F, was a significant part of those moments. She was practically like a sister to me. We'd always been close, even when she was a little dramatic and prone to bending the truth. Despite that, I'd always trusted her. Little did I know, that trust would come back to haunt me. When my grandmother passed away last year, I was devastated. She was my rock, always understanding me better than anyone else in the family. But as we grieved, it also brought up the question of inheritance. I knew my grandmother had left me something in her will. She'd mentioned it a few times, but hadn't gone into detail. So, I assumed there would be no issues with it, until I got a call from my cousin. Lisa called me one evening, saying that she and a few family members had gotten together with the lawyer and read Grandma's will. I hadn't been invited to that gathering, which felt strange. Lisa told me the inheritance was way smaller than anyone thought and that most of it had gone toward medical bills. When I asked if I was mentioned, she hesitated, saying it was a simple mix-up and that my name hadn't come up at all. I felt a sinking suspicion but pushed it aside, trusting that Lisa was telling the truth. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling something wasn't right. I decided to call the lawyer's office myself, just to clarify. The assistant there informed me that I needed to come in person to discuss the will. This only heightened my suspicion, so I made the appointment for the following day. When I arrived, the lawyer presented me with a completely different story. My grandmother had left me a significant inheritance, a sizable amount of cash, and her beloved home. I felt a rush of relief, but also confusion. Why hadn't Lisa mentioned any of this? The lawyer showed me a copy of the will, which clearly stated my share. There was no ambiguity, no mix-up. It was as if Lisa had tried to erase my name from my own inheritance. I called her later that day, demanding an explanation. She tried to laugh it off, saying there must have been a mistake and that she'd been confused. But her tone was defensive, and something about it felt deeply off. I didn't want to believe that she'd purposely tried to deceive me, but I couldn't ignore the evidence. My trust in her was officially shattered. Over the following weeks, I began to piece things together. Lisa had always hinted that she was struggling financially, and I now realized that she might have seen my inheritance as a way out of her troubles. But things escalated when I learned that she'd been telling other family members that I was the one trying to claim more than my share. I confronted her in front of the family at our next gathering, asking her to explain why she'd told them lies. She stammered, saying it was all a misunderstanding, and that she'd only been trying to keep things fair. The family was divided. Some were shocked, while others, mainly those close to Lisa, thought I was blowing things out of proportion. That night, I started digging further into her finances and lifestyle. I didn't want to be the bad guy, but I knew something was going on. I learned that Lisa had recently racked up a huge amount of debt, much of it due to gambling and overspending. Worse, she had been quietly asking family members for loans, citing her dedication to Grandma's memory as a reason they should help her. I couldn't believe it. A few days later, I received a message from an unknown number. It was from Lisa's ex-boyfriend, Nate, 30M, who'd heard about the inheritance drama through mutual friends. He shared that Lisa had done something similar to him. She'd taken money from him under the pretense of getting her life back on track, but had never paid him back. She'd even tried to manipulate him into signing over a small property he owned, saying they'd share it for the future. Nate warned me to be careful, saying Lisa had a pattern of manipulating those close to her. That conversation felt like the last piece of the puzzle. I realized that if I didn't expose her, she'd just move on to another target. To confront her, I waited until the next family gathering. This time, I came prepared, with printed screenshots of text messages she'd sent me about the inheritance, as well as the lawyer's confirmation of my share. I presented it all to my family, laying out every detail. At first, she tried to deny it, but when I brought up Nate's story, she couldn't hold her lie together. Some family members were in shock, while others defended her, saying everyone makes mistakes. But the more we talked, the more details came out. My mother confessed that Lisa had once borrowed money from her, saying she'd been helping cover Grandma's bills. My uncle revealed she'd done the same to him. Bit by bit, Lisa's web of lies unraveled. In the end, the family was divided. Some felt betrayed, while others wanted to forgive her. But for me, the damage was done. I decided to cut Lisa out of my life entirely, focusing on building my own future without her interference. Update 1. A few months after the confrontation, Lisa reached out to apologize. She said she was going to therapy, that she'd changed, and wanted to make amends. I didn't know whether to believe her. Trust isn't something you can rebuild overnight, especially when it's been broken so deeply. I decided to meet with her one last time, mainly to get closure. When we met, she seemed sincere, talking about how she'd hit rock bottom. But when she asked if I could lend her some money to get back on her feet, I realized she hadn't changed at all. That was the last straw. I told her I was done, and I haven't looked back since. Update 2. It's been a year since I cut ties with Lisa, and she's still reaching out occasionally. Recently, I learned she's moved on to other family members, trying to gain their sympathy. Part of me feels responsible for not stepping in sooner, but I also know she has to face the consequences of her actions. I'm finally at peace, building my life with the inheritance my grandmother left me, free from the toxicity that Lisa brought into it. Sometimes, walking away from family is the only way to protect yourself. I discovered my sister was stealing from me, so I exposed her at the family reunion. Growing up in a small town, I, 30M, always had a close relationship with my family, particularly my younger sister, Emily, 26F. We were raised to be each other's confidants, sharing everything from secrets to childhood dreams. My parents instilled in us the values of honesty and trust, and for the longest time, I believed we upheld those principles. After college, I landed a decent job and started saving up. I had dreams of buying my own home, a modest little place that would give me the independence I craved. I saved diligently, and after 3 years, I finally had enough for a down payment. I shared my plans with Emily, excited for the future and even more excited to invite her over to my new home once it was ready. However, everything began to unravel when I noticed some strange discrepancies in my bank account. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just my financial institution's error. But as weeks went by, the small discrepancies grew. I started keeping a closer eye on my statements and soon discovered that money was disappearing at an alarming rate. I was furious. I had worked hard for every penny, and now I felt like a victim in my own life. As I investigated further, I found transactions that I couldn't explain, large withdrawals that I definitely hadn't made. After going through my account activity, I stumbled upon an app one didn't recognize. It seemed like some sort of money-sharing platform. I decided to dig deeper and soon learned that my sister had access to my account. That's when everything clicked. I couldn't believe it. The trust wand had in Emily shattered like glass. Confronting her was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I gathered my evidence, the bank statements, the app, everything. I thought about all the times she'd borrowed money from me over the years, often claiming it was for urgent needs. The truth is, she had been siphoning off my hard-earned cash to fund her own lavish lifestyle, all while pretending to be struggling. I called her that evening. When I confronted her about the money, she went silent. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she might confess. But instead, she started crying, claiming it was all a misunderstanding and that she didn't mean to. I pressed her for details, and she finally admitted to borrowing from my account but insisted that she would pay it back. But her tone was defensive, and I knew this wasn't going to end well. The next day, I took the plunge and went to our parents, Dad, 58, and Mom, 55, to discuss the situation. I felt sick to my stomach, knowing that it would hurt them to hear that their daughter had betrayed me. I showed them the evidence, fully expecting them to be outraged. But instead, they just sat there, looking stunned. My father was the first to break the silence. Emily has always had a bit of a spending problem, he said quietly, almost dismissively. My mother, trying to soften the blow, told me, "You know she loves you." Maybe she was just struggling and didn't know how to ask for help. I was incredulous. I couldn't believe they were siding with her. It was like they were more concerned about protecting Emily than validating my hurt and anger. I felt utterly alone. After this conversation, I realized that if I wanted to move forward, I had to take action. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I changed all my passwords and closed the shared access to my bank account. I also sought legal advice, wanting to know what my options were if it came to pressing charges. The thought of my sister facing legal consequences made me feel sick, but I couldn't allow her to get away with this. Meanwhile, Emily kept calling, begging me to forgive her. She would send me texts saying how sorry she was and how much she loved me. But the more she reached out, the angrier I became. I felt like I was being manipulated, and I refused to let her play the victim. I had to draw a line. With a family reunion coming up, I decided to address everything in front of everyone. I knew it would be a spectacle, but I also knew that Emily had a way of charming everyone with her tears. I needed the rest of the family to see who she really was. It was a calculated risk, but I was done playing nice. The day of the reunion arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I had a few supportive cousins and friends in my corner, ready to back me up. As we gathered around the grill, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and joy. I tried to keep my cool, but I could feel my heart racing every time I spotted Emily. When the moment finally came, I stood up and cleared my throat, commanding attention. "I'd like to say something," I announced, my voice steady despite the chaos inside. "It's about trust, family, and betrayal." Emily shot me a confused look, and I could see her tensing up. I pulled out my evidence, the bank statements, the texts, everything. The crowd fell silent, their eyes darting between me and Emily, who was now pale and on the verge of tears. For the past few months, my sister has been stealing from me. She's been siphoning money from my account to fund her lifestyle. This isn't just a simple mistake, it's a betrayal of trust. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and my parents looked mortified. Emily's face flushed crimson as she tried to stammer a defense, but I didn't let her. I pressed on, detailing how she had borrowed money over the years while secretly stealing from me. "I trusted you, Emily. I thought we had each other's backs. But clearly, that's not the case." My mother jumped in, trying to defend Emily, but the crowd was no longer on her side. I could see the discomfort in everyone's eyes, even some of our family friends who had always supported her. My father remained silent, unable to comprehend the situation. As Emily began to cry, I felt a twinge of guilt. But I pushed it aside, knowing that she had brought this on herself. Just when I thought it was all over, Emily made one last desperate plea. "You don't understand. I was just trying to keep up with everyone else. I didn't think it would hurt you. I was taken aback by her comment. It was like she was trying to justify her actions, blaming her decisions on the pressure of our family's expectations. I had to remind her that we all face pressures, but it's how we respond that defines us. Update 1. After the reunion, I went home feeling a mix of relief and guilt. I hadn't spoken to Emily since that day, and it weighed heavily on me. I began to second-guess my actions, wondering if I had gone too far. But I stood by my choice. Sometimes, you need to take drastic steps to protect yourself. My parents reached out, asking if I'd be willing to talk about it. I agreed, but I made it clear that I wouldn't be discussing it in front of Emily. I needed my parents to understand the full scope of the situation without her manipulation. In our conversation, my parents revealed that they were in shock but also worried about how Emily was coping. I felt a pang of empathy but reminded them that it was her actions that put us in this situation. They promised to talk to her, and I hoped that maybe she would seek help. Update 2. Months passed, and I focused on my career and personal life, trying to move forward. Emily reached out multiple times, but I kept my distance. I knew that if I allowed her back into my life without any real changes, I'd just be inviting more trouble. Then one day, out of the blue, I received a message from Emily's therapist. It was a shock to see her name pop up on my screen, but I opened it cautiously. The therapist explained that Emily had reached out for help and wanted to apologize to me in a way that felt genuine. While I appreciated the gesture, I still wasn't ready to forgive. I decided to meet with the therapist first to discuss Emily's progress. After our conversation, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was a chance for reconciliation, but I also knew it would take time. Update 3. Fast forward to 6 months later, and I received a letter from Emily. She wrote about her journey in therapy, her struggles with feeling inadequate, and how she was working to be a better person. It was raw and honest, and for the first time, I saw the genuine remorse in her words. She expressed how much she missed our relationship and how she would do anything to earn my trust back. It was a hard decision, but I decided to give her one more chance. I suggested we meet for coffee, but I made it clear that trust is earned, not given. I wanted to see if she had really changed. As I walked into the cafe that day, my heart raced. Would she be the same Emily I once knew, or had the experience changed her for good? I hoped for the best, but prepared for the worst. As I spotted her at a corner table, I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. I caught my girlfriend cheating, so I exposed her to the whole school. It was the beginning of my senior year of college, and everything seemed perfect. I, Alex, 22M, had a beautiful girlfriend named Mia, 21F, who was smart, ambitious, and incredibly charming. We had been together for 2 years, and in my eyes, she was the complete package. I envisioned a future with her, including a beautiful wedding and a life filled with love and laughter. I was deeply in love, and it felt like nothing could ruin the fairy tale we had built together. But as the semester progressed, I began to notice some strange changes in Mia's behavior. She started staying out late with her friends more often, frequently mentioning how busy she was with schoolwork and extracurricular activities. My gut feeling told me something was off, but I tried to brush it aside. After all, I trusted her, and I wanted to believe she was just caught up in the chaos of college life. One fateful night, my suspicions reached a boiling point. I had been invited to a party at one of our friends' apartments, and Mia had decided not to come, claiming she had a group project to finish. As I mingled with friends, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to check on her. I decided to swing by her place, thinking it would be a nice surprise and a chance to see if she really was studying. When I arrived at Mia's apartment, I was hit with an unsettling vibe. The lights were dim, and the door was slightly ajar. I knocked, but there was no response. My heart raced as I pushed the door open, and what I saw shattered my world. There was Mia, tangled in sheets with my former roommate, Ethan, 23M. They were in a moment of passion, and the sight felt like a dagger through my heart. The shock paralyzed me for a moment. I wanted to scream, cry, and confront them all at once, but I was frozen in disbelief. This was the person I thought I would marry, and there she was, betraying me in the most visceral way. I finally managed to regain my composure, and I cleared my throat loudly. The sound seemed to echo in the small room. Mia's head snapped up, and the color drained from her face. She pulled away from Ethan, who looked equally horrified. "Alex," Mia stammered, but I didn't give her a chance to explain. I turned on my heel and stormed out, my heart racing with anger and betrayal. I felt the world closing in around me, and all I could think about was how I had been played for a fool. Once outside, I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing thoughts. My mind was racing with questions. How could she do this to me? Why him? I felt a mix of emotions, rage, hurt, disbelief, and a sense of betrayal I had never experienced before. I had to take action. I needed to let the world know the truth. For the next few days, I was a walking zombie, replaying the scene in my mind over and over. I debated on how to confront Mia. I knew she would try to explain her actions, but I had no interest in hearing her excuses. Instead, I devised a plan to expose her for what she really was. The following weekend, I organized a gathering at my place. I invited a close group of friends and made sure Ethan and Mia were on the guest list. My friends had no idea what was coming, but I felt that if I was going to confront them, I had to do it in front of an audience. The thought of them trying to downplay their betrayal while everyone watched filled me with a twisted sense of satisfaction. When the night finally arrived, I made sure to keep my demeanor cool and calm, but inside, I was a storm of emotions. The atmosphere was light, filled with laughter and chatter, but I could feel the tension building as the night progressed. Once everyone had arrived, I gathered everyone in the living room, preparing for what I hoped would be a memorable moment. "Hey everyone, thanks for coming tonight. I have something important to share," I announced, my heart pounding in my chest. The crowd quieted, their attention fully on me. "You all know Mia, right? My girlfriend of 2 years?" I paused, watching as Mia's expression shifted from joy to confusion. I wish I could say our relationship has been perfect, but that would be a lie. I caught Mia cheating on me with someone in this room. The air became electric, and gasps erupted from my friends. Mia's face paled, and Ethan shifted uncomfortably next to her. "That's right, Ethan, my former roommate and someone I once considered a friend." Silence fell over the room as shockwaves rippled through the group. I continued, "I walked in on them last week, tangled up together. So tonight, I wanted to expose the truth because you all deserve to know who she really is." I watched as Mia's mouth opened and closed, desperately searching for the right words. "Alex, please, it's not what it looks like," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "We were drunk, and I made a mistake. It meant nothing." The audience shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. "Drunken mistake? Is that really the best you can do?" I shot back, my voice laced with sarcasm. "You think a drunken mistake gives you a free pass to betray someone who loved you? I can explain." "I thought you wouldn't find out," she blurted, her eyes darting around the room as if seeking help from our friends. But I wasn't done. "You might want to save your breath. I've already sent screenshots of your messages to everyone here. They'll see your truth." I pulled out my phone and displayed the evidence, text messages and photos exchanged between Mia and Ethan, all revealing the nature of their affair. The room erupted into chaos. Friends turned to each other, processing the betrayal, while Mia sat there, tears streaming down her face. I felt a rush of satisfaction knowing that I had taken control of the narrative, but a part of me felt hollow. This wasn't just about revenge, this was about closure. Ethan attempted to defend himself. "Dude, we didn't mean for this to happen. It was a stupid mistake. You can't hold this against me." His voice was shaky, and I could see the regret on his face. "Oh, but I can," I shot back. "You both thought you could have your fun and then come back to me as if nothing happened. But now everyone knows the truth." As the evening continued, some friends sided with me, while others were sympathetic towards Mia. The division made me realize how deeply this betrayal affected not just our relationship but our entire friend group. People were torn between the two of us, and I hated it. Update 1. After that night, everything changed. I cut off contact with Mia and Ethan. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing them, let alone being in the same social circles. It felt like I was living in a nightmare, and each day became more difficult to navigate. I had friends reaching out, asking how I was doing, but I didn't have the energy to reply. Weeks passed, and I focused on my studies and tried to heal from the betrayal. I sought support from friends who were truly on my side, and it felt good to surround myself with people who understood my pain. It was in this time that I discovered how much I had underestimated the support of true friends. But then, one day, I received a message from Mia. It was an apology letter, and for a moment, I hesitated. Should I even give her a chance to explain herself? Curiosity got the better of me, and I reluctantly opened the message. I'm sorry for everything, Alex. I realize how much I hurt you. I made a terrible mistake, and I wish I could take it back. Can we please talk? I felt a mixture of anger and confusion. Did she think that a simple apology would fix everything? Despite my reservations, I agreed to meet her in a public place. I wanted to hear her out, but I also wanted to make it clear that I would not be swayed by her pleas. When I arrived at the cafe, I spotted her sitting alone at a table, looking vulnerable and fragile. I took a deep breath and approached her, ready for whatever confrontation lay ahead. Alex, thank you for coming, she said softly, avoiding eye contact. I know I messed up, and I'm so sorry for what I did. I never meant to hurt you. I crossed my arms, maintaining my distance. What do you want from me, Mia? An apology? You think that's enough? No, it's not, she said, her voice trembling. I just want a chance to explain. Can you please hear me out? I nodded reluctantly, not sure if I was ready to forgive, but willing to listen. I was feeling lost and overwhelmed. I didn't think about the consequences of my actions. When I was with Ethan, it felt like a moment of escape from reality. I know it was a terrible choice, and I regret it every day, she said, tears brimming in her eyes. As she spoke, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to reach out, to hold her and tell her it was okay. But another part of me screamed that I deserved better than someone who could betray me so easily. I need time to think about this, I said finally, feeling a weight settle in my chest. The pain was still fresh, and I wasn't ready to let her back into my life, even if my heart yearned for the connection we once shared. She nodded, understanding the gravity of my words. I'll give you space. But just know that I'll always regret my mistakes. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that my world had been irrevocably altered. Would I ever be able to forgive her? Could our relationship be repaired? Only time would tell, but for now, I needed to focus on healing and moving forward. Caught in the act, my best friend's betrayal on my birthday. As a 24-year-old, life had thrown me a mix of curveballs, but nothing could prepare me for the disaster that was about to unfold on what was supposed to be the best birthday of my life. My name is Jake, and I've always been the kind of guy who embraces every opportunity for a good time. When my birthday rolled around, I decided to throw a massive party at my apartment, inviting friends and acquaintances from all corners of my life. Among those invited was my best friend, Mike, 25M. We'd been inseparable since college, and he was my go-to person for everything, from workouts to life advice. I trusted him implicitly, and he was practically family. The thought of betrayal never crossed my mind, especially on my birthday, a day meant for celebration. The night of the party arrived, and the energy in my apartment was electric. Friends streamed in with drinks, laughter filled the air, and the music pulsated in rhythm with our excitement. I felt on top of the world as I toasted to another year of life, surrounded by people I cared about. Mike was by my side, helping me keep the vibe alive and ensuring that everyone was having a blast. As the night wore on, I noticed a few guests slipping away from the main gathering. I shrugged it off, thinking they just needed some fresh air or a quieter space to chat. But when I spotted Sarah, 23F, a girl I had been casually dating, slipping out with Mike, my heart sank. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe they were just stepping outside to have a private conversation. But as the minutes turned into an hour, I grew more and more uneasy. I decided to step out onto the balcony, where I could see the courtyard below. That's when I saw them, Mike and Sarah, laughing and leaning close together, their body language far too intimate for my comfort. My stomach twisted into knots as I watched them. Were they flirting? Did Mike really have the audacity to hit on someone I was interested in right under my nose? Fueled by a mix of anger and betrayal, I decided to confront them. I stormed downstairs, and as I approached, I could hear their laughter echoing in the night. The sight of them together made my blood boil, and I couldn't hold back anymore. "Hey! What the hell is going on here?" I shouted, startling them both. Mike's face paled, and Sarah looked genuinely surprised. "Jake!" Mike stammered, fumbling for words. I cut him off. "Don't even try to explain. I saw you two getting cozy. What's wrong with you, man? You know I've been interested in Sarah. Calm down." "It's not what it looks like," Mike insisted, but his defensive tone only fueled my anger. "Not what it looks like? You're flirting with my date on my birthday." I shot back, the betrayal stinging deeper than I expected. "Jake, we were just talking. I didn't mean to step on your toes." "I thought you two were just friends," Mike said, attempting to defuse the situation. "Friends? Yeah, well, you're about to find out what real friendship looks like," I replied, feeling the heat rising in my chest. "Get out of my sight." Mike looked taken aback, his expression shifting from confusion to hurt. "Come on, don't do this. It's a misunderstanding." But I wasn't interested in hearing any more of his excuses. I turned to Sarah, feeling betrayed by her, too. "And you, seriously? I thought you were different. You couldn't even wait until my birthday was over?" She looked guilty, her eyes darting between me and Mike. "I didn't mean for it to happen. We were just having fun," she said softly. "Fun? Is this your idea of fun?" I shouted, my voice echoing through the courtyard. "I'm sorry, Jake," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. In that moment, I felt a wave of rage wash over me. The combination of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak overwhelmed me, and I knew I had to do something drastic to regain control. I decided to make my feelings known to everyone at the party. I stormed back inside and took to the living room, where my guests were still mingling and laughing. I cleared my throat, grabbing everyone's attention. "Hey, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the party. I just wanted to let you know that Mike and Sarah have been cozying up together outside, completely disregarding the fact that I invited them both here for my birthday." Gasps filled the room, and the atmosphere shifted from celebratory to tense. My friends turned to look at Mike and Sarah, their expressions a mix of shock and judgment. "What? Jake, that's not fair." Mike protested, but the damage was done. "Not fair? You think what you did is fair?" I shot back. "I wanted to celebrate with people I trust, and you both have shattered that trust." The room buzzed with whispers as people processed what was happening. I felt a mix of satisfaction and regret. Part of me loved the thrill of exposing their betrayal, but another part of me was heartbroken over the fallout of my friendship with Mike. As the night continued, the tension grew unbearable. Friends started leaving one by one, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. The party that was supposed to be filled with joy turned into an awkward farewell. Mike and Sarah remained silent, their shame palpable. Update 1. The next day, I awoke to a barrage of messages on my phone. Friends were reaching out, some supporting me while others sided with Mike and Sarah. My social media was flooded with comments, and it felt like I had opened a can of worms I couldn't close. I felt a mix of anxiety and sadness, unsure of how to face my friends or what to do next. That afternoon, I received a text from Mike, asking to meet up. My gut instinct told me to ignore him, but I knew that avoiding the conversation wouldn't make this any easier. I reluctantly agreed to meet at our usual cafe. When I arrived, I found Mike sitting at a table, looking defeated. He had always been the more charismatic of the two of us, but now he seemed like a shadow of his former self. "Jake, I'm really sorry for what happened. I didn't think it would come to this," he said, his voice low. "Didn't think what would come to this?" I snapped, anger still bubbling beneath the surface. "Didn't think you'd betray me? You didn't think I'd find out?" "I never meant to hurt you," he said, shaking his head. "It was a stupid mistake. I thought we were just having fun. You and Sarah weren't exclusive yet. But I was interested in her." I shot back. "You should have respected that." "I know," he admitted, his eyes downcast. "I messed up. But please, can't we just move past this? I'm willing to do whatever it takes to repair our friendship." "Repair it?" I scoffed. "You can't just take back a betrayal like that. It doesn't work like that, Mike. I'll do anything, man. Just give me another chance," he pleaded, desperation seeping into his tone. I took a deep breath, weighing my options. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again. This isn't just about Sarah, it's about you violating my trust as a friend. I need time to think." As I stood to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that our friendship had been irreparably damaged. I walked away from the cafe feeling heavier than I had in years. Update 2. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to move on. I focused on work and other friendships, determined not to let Mike's betrayal define me. But everywhere I turned, I was reminded of what had happened. My friend still had mixed feelings, and the divide created awkward situations that left me feeling isolated. Then, one evening, I received a text from Sarah, asking to meet. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to dive back into the mess that had unfolded. But my curiosity won, and I agreed to meet her at a local bar. When I arrived, Sarah was already there, fidgeting with her drink. She looked nervous, and I could see the guilt etched on her face. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, well, it's not like I had much of a choice," I replied, taking a seat across from her. "I wanted to apologize for everything. I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she said, her eyes pleading. "You have to believe me. I really thought we were just friends. It didn't seem like anything serious between you two." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. "You think that makes it okay? You still went behind my back and hooked up with Mike. That's not something you just brush off." "I know, and I'm sorry. I really am," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't realize how much I valued our connection until it was too late. I liked you, Jake. I really did. But when Mike and I were together, I thought it was just harmless fun. I never wanted to hurt you." Her words struck a chord within me. Part of me wanted to forgive her. After all, I had feelings for her, too. But another part of me couldn't shake the betrayal. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" I asked, my voice wavering. "I want to make things right. Can we start over? I don't want to lose you," she pleaded. The conflict within me deepened. I was still hurt, but I was also drawn to her sincerity. "I need time to think," I said again, feeling cornered by the weight of her gaze. "I understand," she replied softly. "But just know that I'm here, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." As we parted ways, I felt the burden of indecision heavy on my shoulders. I knew I had to choose my next steps wisely. Months passed, and I kept my distance from both Mike and Sarah. I tried to rebuild my life without their drama, but the scars of betrayal lingered. Then one night, as I was scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a photo that made my heart drop, a picture of Mike and Sarah together, smiling as they embraced at a party. It was the kind of moment I had envisioned sharing with either of them. My gut twisted with anger, betrayal flaring up anew. How could they move on so easily after everything that had happened? That was it, I was done. I couldn't remain silent any longer. I decided to confront them, but this time, I would do it on my terms. I organized a gathering with mutual friends and invited Mike and Sarah, intending to make my feelings known in front of everyone. I wanted them to feel the weight of their betrayal, and I needed my friends to understand why I was cutting them out of my life for good. As the night approached, my heart raced with anticipation. This was it, the moment I would finally reclaim my narrative. I had no idea how they would react or if they'd try to defend themselves again, but I knew I had to stand my ground. When the evening came, I took a deep breath and stepped into my apartment, ready to face whatever was about to unfold. As I scanned the room, my eyes landed on Mike and Sarah, and the anger surged within me. "Hey, everyone. I'm glad you all could make it," I called out, gathering attention. I just wanted to address something that's been weighing on my heart. Mike and Sarah exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from joy to concern. I could see they knew what was coming. "I'm cutting ties with both of you," I said firmly, my voice steady. "You both crossed a line I can't overlook, and it's time for me to move on. I deserve friends who respect me, not ones who betray me." Gasps echoed throughout the room, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Mike looked incredulous while Sarah appeared ready to protest, but I didn't give them a chance to speak. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I've spent too much time forgiving people who don't deserve it. It's time for me to put myself first." As I spoke, I could feel a shift in the atmosphere. Friends murmured their support, some nodding in agreement, while others watched with wide eyes, clearly taken aback by my boldness. "Jake, wait," Mike said, his voice laced with desperation. "We can talk about this." But I shook my head, feeling empowered. "No more talking. I'm done." With that, I turned away, leaving Mike and Sarah behind, their shocked expressions burned into my memory. It was time for me to reclaim my life, to stop living in the shadows of their choices. I walked away, feeling lighter than I had in months. AITA for exposing my teacher's affair with my dad? My name is Emily, and I'm 22 years old. I never thought I would find myself in the middle of such a messy situation, but here we are. To set the stage, my dad, Mark, is 45, and my mom, Karen, is 43. They've been married for over 20 years, and as far as I knew, they had a solid relationship. That all changed when I found out about my dad's affair with my high school English teacher, Miss Thompson, who's 36. It all started during my last year of high school. I was an honors student, and Miss Thompson had always been one of my favorite teachers. She was passionate about literature and inspired me to pursue writing. However, I started to notice some strange behaviors. Miss Thompson would often excuse me from class to have private conversations with my dad, who was a frequent visitor at school events as a local community leader. I thought nothing of it initially, it seemed innocent enough. Things took a darker turn during my graduation. After the ceremony, I was scrolling through social media when I stumbled upon a picture that made my heart drop. It was a candid shot of my dad and Miss Thompson, looking cozy and intimate at a local bar, clearly on a date. I felt my stomach twist in knots. It was a shocking betrayal, not just of my mom, but of the trust one had in both of them. I couldn't confront my dad right away. I needed proof, so I started keeping an eye on their social media and asking around. Over the next few weeks, I gathered enough information to confirm what I feared: they were indeed having an affair. I felt sick to my stomach, torn between my loyalty to my mother and my desire to confront the truth. One afternoon, after weeks of internal turmoil, I decided to confront my dad. I found him in the living room, relaxed and watching TV. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. "Dad, can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked at me, a hint of concern crossing his face. "Sure, what's up?" I sat down, choosing my words carefully. "I saw you with Miss Thompson at the bar. What's going on?" He froze, and for a moment, I thought he might deny it. But then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Emily, it's not what you think." "Not what I think?" "You were on a date with her. You're married to Mom." I couldn't hold back my anger. It's complicated, he replied, shifting uncomfortably. Complicated? You're betraying Mom. Do you even care how this affects her? I pressed, my voice rising. Of course I care. But things between your mother and me haven't been great for a while, he admitted, frustration creeping into his tone. Does that justify cheating? Are you really trying to blame Mom for your actions? I shot back, hurt and confused. It's not about blame, he insisted. You don't understand what it's like. No, Dad, you don't understand. I can't just stand by and watch you destroy our family, I replied, my heart racing. He looked away, guilt etched on his face. I never wanted you to find out like this. Well, now I know, and you need to tell Mom. It's the right thing to do, I said firmly. He opened his mouth to protest, but then closed it, his shoulders slumping in defeat. You're right. I'll talk to her. I felt a mix of anger and relief, but deep down, I knew this wouldn't end well. I didn't sleep that night, consumed by thoughts of how my mom would react to the news. Would she be heartbroken? Would she forgive him? Update 1. The next day, I forced myself to stay calm as I waited for my dad to return home. When he finally walked in, his face was pale. I told her, he said quietly. And? I asked, bracing myself for the worst. She's devastated, Em. I've never seen her like this. She was in shock, he admitted, his eyes filled with regret. What did she say? I pressed. She wants to talk to you, he said, shifting uncomfortably. She's hurt, and she needs someone to lean on. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I was torn between wanting to support my mom and feeling angry at my dad for putting us in this position. I took a deep breath and headed to my mom's room, where I found her sitting on the bed, tears streaming down her face. Mom? I said softly, sitting next to her. I'm so sorry. Emily, I can't believe this is happening, she sobbed, her voice trembling. I thought we were happy. We were, Mom. I didn't know anything was wrong. I wish I could have done something, I said, wrapping my arms around her. You shouldn't have to worry about this. It's not your fault, she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. I just want you to be okay. What do you want to do? I asked, hoping to give her some control in this chaotic moment. I don't know, honey. I feel so lost, she admitted. Update 2. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. My mom decided to confront Miss Thompson, wanting to hear her side of the story. I felt sick at the thought of it, but I knew it was necessary. When the meeting was set up, I offered to go with her for support. We arrived at the cafe where they agreed to meet, and my heart raced with anxiety. When Miss Thompson walked in, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and disappointment. She seemed so composed, as if she didn't realize the chaos her actions had caused. Thank you for meeting us, my mom said, her voice steady despite her obvious distress. Miss Thompson nodded, her expression neutral. I'm sorry for everything that's happened. I never meant to hurt anyone. My mom's face twisted with emotion. But you did hurt us. You broke my family apart. I know, and I deeply regret it. It was a mistake, she replied, her voice soft. A mistake? You call cheating with my husband a mistake, my mom snapped, anger rising. I made poor choices. I was confused and caught up in emotions, Ms. Thompson explained, avoiding my mom's gaze. Confused? You were my teacher. You were supposed to be a role model. I interjected, feeling my anger boil over. I never intended for any of this to happen, she insisted, but her words felt hollow. The conversation spiraled into an argument, with emotions running high. I watched as my mom struggled to maintain her composure while facing the woman who had caused her so much pain. In that moment, I felt a mix of empathy for my mom and disdain for Miss Thompson. I think it's best if we leave now, I finally said, sensing the situation was becoming more toxic. As we walked out, I could see the relief on my mom's face. Thank you for being here, Emily. I needed you, she said, her voice shaky. I'll always be here for you, Mom, I replied, my heart aching for the turmoil she was going through. Update 3. Over the next few weeks, things only got messier. My dad moved out, opting to stay with a friend until he figured things out. My mom was heartbroken, struggling to cope with the reality of her marriage falling apart. I felt the weight of it all, trying to be a supportive daughter while grappling with my own feelings of betrayal and anger. Then, one evening, my dad showed up at our house unannounced. I could see the guilt etched on his face as he stood at the door, looking like a man defeated. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, unsure of how to react. "What do you want, Dad?" "I want to talk to you and your mom," he said, his eyes pleading. I exchanged a glance with my mom, who was standing behind me, uncertainty written all over her face. After a moment, I stepped aside and let him in, feeling a mix of dread and curiosity. Once inside, my dad sat on the couch, his hands trembling. "I know I messed up. I'm sorry for what I've done. I love your mother, and I want to make things right," he began. "You think you can just waltz back in here and expect us to forgive you?" I snapped, my anger bubbling to the surface. "Emily, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm trying to change. I want to go to counseling, and I want to fight for our family," he pleaded. My mom sat down, her expression conflicted. "Mark, it's not that simple. You hurt me in a way that's hard to forget. I understand that, but I'm willing to do the work. I want to prove to you that I can be a better man," he said, his voice breaking. As my dad spoke, I could see the desperation in his eyes, but part of me still felt betrayed. "What about Miss Thompson? Are you going to keep seeing her?" I asked, crossing my arms. He shook his head vigorously. "No, it's over. I realize now that it was a huge mistake, and I regret every moment of it." My mom's gaze softened slightly, but she still looked torn. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Mark. It's going to take time. I'm willing to be patient. I'll do anything to make it right," he said, desperation evident in his voice. Update 4. Days turned into weeks, and I watched my parents navigate the turbulent waters of their relationship. They began attending counseling together, which gave me a glimmer of hope. However, the tension in our home remained palpable. I often found myself caught in the middle, trying to support my mom while grappling with my feelings for my dad. One evening, as I was finishing my homework, my mom knocked on my door. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I nodded, closing my laptop and sitting up. "Of course, what's up?" "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened," she started, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can forgive your dad." "Mom, you don't have to rush into anything. Take your time," I said, trying to reassure her. "I know, but I feel so lost. Part of me wants to give him another chance, but I'm terrified of being hurt again," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "Just be honest with yourself. If you don't feel ready, that's okay. You deserve happiness," I encouraged her. As we talked, I could see the conflict in her heart. "You know, I've thought about leaving him. Maybe it's for the best," she confessed. "Do what feels right for you, Mom." "You've been through so much," I replied, feeling the weight of her pain. Days later, she made her decision. She sat down with my dad and told him that she needed space. It was a painful but necessary step for her healing. I felt a mix of relief and sadness. It was clear that my family would never be the same. As time went on, I distanced myself from my dad, opting to focus on my mom's well-being. I supported her through the ups and downs, and while it was challenging, we grew closer as a result. Eventually, my dad moved out completely, and the affair became a distant memory, but it still haunted me. Months later, I received an unexpected text from my dad, *, "I've made mistakes, but I want to be in your life again. Can we talk?" *. I stared at my phone, heart racing. I didn't know how to respond. Did I want him back in my life? Or was it too late for redemption? As I debated what to do, I realized that my journey was far from over. The betrayal had left its mark, and healing would take time. I had the power to decide how to move forward, whether it meant giving my dad another chance or protecting myself from further heartache.